I am mindful of these things where I want to cycle through my supplements. I don't want to stay on them indefinitely, continuously, where that becomes a baseline. I mean, this is the same thing that you do with workouts, right? You work out a certain body part, but you cycle through body parts. I try a variety of things. I also listen to my body. That's how I dose these things. So it's science as well as intuition.
Welcome to Ikafa podcast. I have amazing Shawn Wells with me. Shawn, you have so many credentials, but I think the most significant one and the one that everybody say all the time, the world's best, greatest formulator.
Oh, that you're going to
Renowned
say
for
hugger. Yeah, I'm both. I'm both.
Yes,
I'm
you're
the
a
world's
great hugger.
greatest hugger and the world's greatest formulator. But yes, I take pride in both of those. The science and the soul.
Exactly. Actually, I was going to start with that. Before I start to all these, my audience, obviously, they don't know you. They're going to start knowing you more. And I keep also sharing some of your sayings, your posts, and etc. on my Instagram. But I think that hugging, yes. But when I met you, I also shared it with your partner. The warmth and the genuinity that you showed me in that huge conference, that I see mostly people who have some names around, that they just are a little bit more, sometimes arrogant, sometimes not so loving, kind, and welcoming.
Right.
When I met you, I felt really, really comfortable. And then when I started digging in a little bit, I'm like, oh my God, this guy is a legend. He's a legend in his field. So it was actually better if I didn't know before I met you, then I start researching. But my understanding is that you have an undergraduate from Babson College, Business Administration. You went to Chapel Hill for nutrition and biochemistry. And I read part of your book, and you had a bit of a challenging start in your life. I'm sure you find a huge pride where you're at. Besides formulating supplements, you're a certified sports nutrition and also a registered dietitian.
I think that's it. I've been formulating for 20 years, 25 years, and patenting unique ingredients using my clinical background, my sports nutrition background, my biochemistry background to do all this work and certainly help educate people. That's something that I'm most proud of, is not only being able to work in the science realm, but work in the clinical realm and then work on the education front as well. I think I bring all these worlds together.
And I also paid attention at the lecture that I listened to you at the Hack Your Health Summit. And also, you have a very spiritual message. It's more spiritual than a chemical in a way. It's just like, loving one another. Try to heal your trauma, find a purpose. And obviously, it's very parallel to this Blue Zones approach. And I see a shift, interestingly, me being a psychologist, actually, it's fascinating to watch how that biohacking field now having this shift into the meditation, spirituality, community, purpose from so many mechanics and so many machines and supplements. And one thing really got my attention. You say, it doesn't matter how many supplements you take, psyche, your energy inside, your calmness, your homeostasis, but psychological, is not in place. These supplements are not going to do good for you. So with that said, you suggested me to take a couple of supplements, and these names are out of this world. I have to start asking, how do you come up with these bunch of letters and numbers and mix? For someone who's not American, it's difficult to pronounce, but I'm sure Americans are having a difficulty as well. Because knowing that you have multiple novel supplements that you came up with that nobody ever found about.
Yeah, that's it's organic chemistry. So if you're into organic chemistry, where certain methyl groups are or certain functional groups are connected on a ring or what have you. So I think I've mentioned to you 7,8 dihydroxyflavone.
Yes.
or its metabolite for dimethylamino 7,8-dihydroxyflavone. Those are both really potent compounds for enhancing brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is BDNF, a protein that's associated with neuroplasticity, which is really keeping the brain young. We've found that BDNF is the most important protein in the body to protect neurons as well as create new neurons. And neurons are brain cells. So this is a way to keep the brain young, to keep a heightened ability to learn new tasks. This is what we call fluid intelligence versus crystallized intelligence. Fluid intelligence is those abilities to take on new tasks, which is easier when the brain is younger. So this is really one of the most potent ways we know of to keep the brain young is taking these two compounds as well as a host of polyphenols, which is high in these blue zone diets. So, pterostilbene in blueberries, resveratrol in red wine, EGCG in green tea, catechins that are in cacao. There's a host of these polyphenols that have been shown to increase BDNF, including chlorogenic acid that's in coffee. That's been well studied. But these are the most potent compounds that I know of is the 7,8-dihydroxyflavone and the 4-DMA 7,8-dihydroxyflavone for protecting the brain and keeping the brain young.
So these two falls into the nootropic category or more healing ability?
You could argue either one because it is potentially prophylactic, as you're saying, prophylactic meaning protecting the brain, or it could be therapeutic in healing the brain. There's data on both fronts, but I think nootropic does make a lot of sense, and there appears to be acute benefit too.
I see. So, but let's kind of rewind a little bit because my people, I want them to know you a little more. How did you decide suddenly from business administration falling into the biochemistry?
Yeah, it's a great question. I grew up with my mom loving supplements and me believing in supplements quite a bit. She used these whole food supplements called Shaklee that were from Europe, and it's still a trusted brand. And this was back in the 1970s. So she was ahead of her time, I think, with supplements. And she had the big, tackle box with all the different tablets and soft gels in there. So I remember that quite distinctly. And I was in school doing my undergrad at Babson, and I started working out. I started getting in better shape. I grew up a junk food junkie. I had a pretty traumatic childhood, and food was very therapeutic for me. But I was pretty depressed, and I was at college, and I started working out and kind of finding myself and using supplements like creatine and protein and BCAAs and getting like really good results. And when I went to the doctor was blown away at my change in body composition. And I started talking about all these magazines and books I was reading and all these ingredients. And he turned to me, drew out a lifeline on a piece of paper, and said, as I was 20 at the time, he said, "Why not be happy between here and here?" And it was 20 to 80. And I was like, wow, this guy just like out of the blue saw how passionate I was and gave me permission to go pursue my passion. I didn't even know that I was asking permission for that. But, as a doctor, I was expecting him to almost make fun of what I was talking about because this was in 1994.
Yep.
So, there wasn't many doctors that were talking about the value of supplements at that time. And instead, he ended up giving me permission to pursue this path. So I ended up finishing my degree at Babson, but doing a minor in chemistry, going back to school to get all the prerequisites, which was about 2 solid years of labs and scientific courses, which I studied in UNC Greensboro. And then I got all the courses I needed, all the biochems, organic chemistries, exercise physiology, anatomy physiology, got all that out of the way. and got into UNC Chapel Hill and pursued nutrition and biochemistry through the School of Public Health and School of Medicine, and did a minor in exercise sports science and got my RD in the process. I became a registered dietitian. I worked clinically for a decade in hospitals and nursing homes. I also worked with athletes. As you said, I became certified as a sport nutritionist, and since then I became a fellow in the International Society of Sports Nutrition. But yeah, that was my path, and goes to show the power of someone giving you advice and the power of someone's word, like where it can make or break your dreams. I was never able to find this guy again, but I would not be where I am had he not said that. And it's really like created my entire life path, my entire identity, because he said those words.
How long it's been you are formulating supplements, like brand new, unheard of?
It's almost 25 years now.
So what's your approach when you decide to formulate a supplement? Like, you look to something missing, you look to another supplement that there is this, but it's not quite working. Let me tweak a little bit.
So I have taken heat. I have taken negative comments sometimes when I show people my supplement collections that look as big as a GNC at my apartment. I have probably a couple thousand supplements, but part of this is, yes, I do take supplements. I do test supplements. I not only test them analytically, I test them for flavor, I test them for effect. I look at the labels, I compare things. I want to have things in my hands. This is what makes me the best at what I do, is I'm constantly putting these things through their paces. And it matters to me. I could just look up something online and say, yep, I'll just copy that formula that seems to be successful. Maybe I'll add one thing. That's not what I do. I definitely think about, one, full transparency with everything to do with the product. There's no proprietary blends. I want everything to be fully listed in the dose, the form, meaning the standardization, the plant part, what the active is, the genus and species. So, for example, it would be, ginseng, and I would say standardized for ginsenoside A, and it's at 50 milligrams, or whatever it is based on the studies, and it's going to be the root. I'm going to list the plant part. Everything is full transparency. And then every ingredient in the formula should have a complementary mechanism of action, where whatever the ingredient is that's best for that one mechanism of action, that's the only one I'm going to include. I'm not going to include 5 ingredients because people have heard of those 5 ingredients that all do the same thing. That doesn't make sense. There's a lot of formulas out there that do that, and that's just for marketing purposes. I'm going to pick the single best ingredient that is most efficacious, and then I'm going to pick other ingredients that have complementary mechanisms of action for true synergy. If I want a blood sugar product, there is a number of mechanisms that I'm going to put in a formula together around. And of course, I'm talking to the customer. I'm talking to them to understand what it is they want, like who the customer is, what the effects they want to see out of this. And of course, even cost factors in. I have some of these formulas with doctors that the raw materials alone are $25 for the formula. And then if you think about, the marketing and putting the formula out there and distribution and shipping and affiliates, or putting it on Amazon, and ultimately that's going to sell to the customer for over $100 for that to be profitable. So I do a wide range of formulas and for a number of customers all across the world, and I have to understand regulatory concerns, what different countries have in terms of their regulatory, what ingredients are legal and what ingredients are not legal, all that.
Such a great thing you said. So let's say that in Turkey, there are regulations. There are actually very strict regulations. Actually, after I listened to multiple podcasts of yours, I thought to myself, I'm glad there are these regulations. Weirdly enough, because you're really concerned on these unheard supplement brands selling their stuff on Amazon without being regulated, without even telling what's really inside. They come up with this proprietary blends. Then it made me think, maybe it's a good thing that there are really strong regulations so people cannot come up with some nonsense and put on the shelves. But let's say that, hey, Shawn, I want something for cellular regeneration and also whatever, senolytics, yada, yada, the new type of molecules that is out. But yet if in Turkey that certain top limits, let's say I'll take NMN. In America it's like 1,000 milligram. In Europe it's 300 milligram. In Turkey it's 50 milligram. So do you go to the customer and say, okay, let's now look to what's the goal? What do you want to achieve? So instead of maybe using this, let's use whatever it's allowed. Is it how also you are able to think?
Yes, exactly. I'm going to factor in all those regulatory concerns. I'm also factoring in stability work. I do a lot of work around stability, and I do what's called accelerated and real-time stability. I know how these nutrients actually interact with each other. One, at time of blending, but two, over time with light, with heat, with age, with moisture, how they interact with each other, and will they test out? Do we need overages? Do these two ingredients just not work at all? So I'm thinking about those things as well. And then there's different particle sizes. You may have some the raw materials that are microencapsulated, some are granulated, some are a very fine powder, and making all of that work together is sometimes complicated. And then on a flavor front, if it's like a ready to mix powder or a ready to drink beverage, there's complications there. And I work on, things like anti-aging serums and cosmeceuticals as well. And there's complications there in terms of the medium that they're in and in the case of these powders, how well that they dissolve and how soluble they are. With beverages, things settle out and not stay in solution? Do the flavors change over time? There's so much work that's actually done. It's very complicated work.
Because you know that, and because you also know that all these cheap or cheaper brands doesn't invest into these, there are probably like hundred thousands of supplement brands out there, and you have a real concern what the customer should pay attention to.
Yeah, Now Foods, who's a very trusted company that's been around for at least 35 years, really great company in terms of their quality control, in terms of their pricing, definitely one of the more historic brands in the United States. They've been losing market share to these companies on Amazon that are listing, ingredients very cheaply, and they're not playing fair. So they decided, using a third party lab, pay for testing for 14 different ingredients like astaxanthin, CoQ10, berberine, and they tested out maybe 40, 50 different companies for each one of these ingredients. On average, 70 to 80% of the products that they tested short of label claim. And on average, 20 to 30% of those products had no active at all. There's some real problems in terms of quality control and testing. And then there's some problems with some companies that have been on Amazon that are just outright liars, that are the reason that they're the cheapest product and the reason that they're beating everyone else out on Amazon in terms of price is that there's no active whatsoever in that product. And then on top of that, there's a huge problem with Amazon with counterfeit products, with really good brands like Thorne and Pure Encapsulations and even Now Foods, where there's companies that are printing labels and pretending that they're these products. And again, it's just counterfeit product with no active.
So it's not controlled. It's hard to probably chase all of them.
It's hard to control, but Amazon is now, because Now Foods has done this, Amazon is trying to change their practices, but it's been a mess for a long time. And if I was going to buy on Amazon, I would buy from that first party company and a first party that I trust. Like, so I would get it from Thorne, I would get it from Now, from Pure Encapsulations, from Gero, from Doctor's Best, Nordic Naturals. These are like some really good brands that have been around a long time. Some of these new brands that I've never heard of, are just the cheapest thing on Amazon. I would definitely have concerns about.
So what do you think of the shelf life? Because, I bring in supplements from the US and sometimes I try to stock them because, it's not easy to ship things to Turkey. I sometimes find out that, oh my God, I put this on the back of the shelf and now it's almost done. But it's good brands, let's say orthomolecular products or Metagenics or and these brands. So when it's the due date, means that that's it. After that, you should not use, or if it's unopened bottle, can it be still used? Because I know you spent some thinking on that.
That's for meeting label claim. It should be able to go the full 2 years unopened and still meet label claim. After that 2 years, it may be below label claim, but chances are, especially if you've been holding it in good temperature, humidity, it's not been opened, and especially if you were to put it in a refrigerator or freezer, it would still be full strength.
Mm-hmm.
And after 2 years, you may have 1%, 5% decline, or, something like that. It's still absolutely worth taking. It's just not going to meet label claim to the same degree. Literally, those companies are doing things right, and they're putting in overages to account for those 2 years. They've done a lot of testing, that stability testing that I'm talking about.
Okay. My doctor from the US, sometimes when I call her, I say, you know what, it's just at the cusp of the end. She says, nothing would happen for another month. You can use it. That's why I was wondering. Yeah. So what are the supplements that you suggest everyone to absolutely take? And it has to be the main ingredients that they should take in, vitamins and minerals that one needs. That, from B to C to, depending on your needs, it can be sodium and whatnot. And there are all these, new things, NMN, urolithin A, the symbiotics, it's a huge list, nitric oxide, name it. There's so many. The first part that I mentioned, you can test them. And you can see okay, my level is this, the optimal level should be this, let me take more, let me stop it, whatnot. The other ones, it's very difficult to test. I mean, do you know a way to test them? So how do you decide what to take? What are the main things that one needs to take and your guidance?
Yeah, I think obviously it's going to vary from person to person. If you're going to, one, you have to factor in that we're all bio-individual. So we all have different genetics. We all have a different liver that processes these things differently. For example, I worked on paraxanthine, which is a metabolite of caffeine, that about 60% of us are slow metabolizers of caffeine. So we don't process caffeine well, and we have all the side effects and very little benefits. That's the majority of the population. If you take paraxanthine, it's this clean metabolite where you experience energy on a much different level. You don't have the side effects. You get great sleep, you get great energy, and it actually improves neuroplasticity, improves learning, improves focus in the brain, and reduces mental errors. So, we see a tremendous benefit with paraxanthine. It's the same with 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate and the MTHFR gene. About 40% of us have an enzymatic error with MTHFR, so we don't process folic acid well. So getting folic acid in cereal, in breads, in certain supplements can actually do more harm than good. Can actually build up to a toxic level, and we can be anemic. So that's a huge problem. And if you're not aware of these things, then you're not taking the correct supplements for that. So these are massive numbers. They're not small numbers like, 0.5% of this population. This is, those two alone, that's 40% and 60%. Those are things that you need to be aware of.
B vitamins and folate, actually, my family, we are not able to methylate. So we're taking it a methylated form.
Yeah, I would say in general that everyone should be taking the methylated B vitamins. That's like methylcobalamin for B12, 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate or methylfolate for folic acid, P5P for B6, which is pyridoxal 5-phosphate, etc. The methylated forms are the ones to definitely take over the standard synthetic supplement forms of the B vitamins. That is a critical point right there. And then I think taking, like with the minerals, the organic acid forms. So things like, for example, with magnesium, it would be magnesium citrate, calcium citrate, magnesium malate, things like that, or taking the amino acid chelates, which would be magnesium glycinate, which you're bonding the glycine, the amino acid, to it in a chelated form. These are much higher in bioavailability. So getting these high bioavailability minerals, getting these methylated B vitamins, getting vitamin D in its more active form in D3 versus D2, all of these things make a huge difference. So the quality of your vitamins matter as much, if not more, than the dose.
I heard you once saying oil form of D vitamin.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Yeah, there's a dry form of D, and it's been shown time and time again that the dry form of D is inferior. That's where they powderize that form. They take it from an oil and put it into a powder. It's been shown that not only is the oil superior, but if you take your vitamin D at the same time, if you co-administer with a fatty meal, it's going to enhance the uptake. So not only do I think that you should get vitamin D3 in its oil-based form, but I think you should also try and take it with other fats, a fatty meal, other oils.
Interesting monkey theory thing that there's something is spoken there and then suddenly the whole world starts talking about it. That suddenly this creatine is like any person that I listen, any podcast, any ads in front of me, or in my fitness instructor, suddenly everybody is talking about creatine. It seems like it's been there forever. It's the most looked up, researched supplement. But is there a reason why right now there's a sudden boom, or am I being behind?
No, I think it's legitimate. One, there was a whole TikTok phenomenon where women were talking about it increasing the size of their booties. Like literally, this drove high demand for it. Two, there was a regulation that came out of China in terms of how creatine was made that made it a lot more expensive and difficult to make, to actually clean up the process of how it is synthesized. That led to a huge shortage for some period through COVID, and where creatine probably 5x'd in price. That led to some supply and demand issues. But here's the thing with creatine on a legitimate level in terms of the science. We're about 700 studies in. It's shown to be highly effective, not only for muscle power and strength, that was kind of the foundation of creatine, but now we're seeing so much benefit beyond that. It is protective to muscle, and we know muscle is critical to how we age and how well we are aging and our longevity. Like grip strength is probably the number one indicator of longevity. Beyond that, we know that it protects the brain, not only with healing the brain, like traumatic brain injury, but being protective to the brain. We also saw a recent study where where people were underslept, that when given an acute dose of creatine, they had better outcomes for the next day. They had higher cognitive function. They appeared less sleepy. They were more wakeful. So it has an acute effect, a nootropic effect. But again, improving outcomes with things like traumatic brain injury, improving outcomes with autism, Parkinson's, a number of conditions related to neurological function. We also see it protect DNA. So it may actually improve outcomes with things like cancer because it is a powerful methylator. It protects the ovaries and the testes. So it may improve fertility. It improves bone mineral density, improved eye function. So creatine is a very powerful nutrient that goes well beyond skeletal muscle. But even if it was just skeletal muscle data alone, I would still be taking it every day. Man, woman, child, any age, I would take creatine every day.
I keep hearing it's like the 5 milligram thing. How is it possible? Like men, women, children, obese, large person, tall person. What's the reason of that 5 milligram?
It's 5 grams.
I'm sorry,
But
5 gram.
a dose around 5 grams would maybe be for an athletic person. I think 2 to 3 grams is enough for someone who is not highly athletic or resistance training. Basically, as long as you're taking it every day, you will reach full muscle saturation of creatine phosphate stores within 30 days. You can reach it faster if you're taking higher doses, but I think it's fine to take, 2 to 3 grams a day, again, if you're not like a highly trained athlete. And you can even take it in divided doses. It's actually shown to be more effective that way. So if you were taking 1 gram 2 to 3 times a day, that would be ideal.
I recently started taking it. Actually, it was Natalie who told me. I was sharing something. She says, why don't you start taking creatine? After the conference, I went to New York and I bought some creatine. We have a horrible sleep pattern in our family, and I try to do more or less everything to be able to manage it well. And because I'm in recovery, I cannot use these narcotic substances, meaning like any sleeping pill and whatnot. I saw a huge difference, I shall say, a deeper sleep and much rested, even though the length of my sleep is short, meaning because I travel these days a lot. I take 2.5 grams in the morning, 12.5 grams at night. And I saw an interesting energy that I have and a much deeper sleep. It's a weird thing because I can't really understand when I sleep deep or not. And since then, I'm just like, I'm very surprised. And I started thinking probably creatine has a lot to do with it.
Absolutely.
But it was interesting, as I said, probably through sports people that they were using it, but not the regular people like me, like, many people that I know. This creatine thing was like very much into the bodybuilding or a fitness instructor arena rather than merging into the normal people's daily intake. That's what I was trying to say, because very well established fitness gurus and brain experts, everyone nowadays, they're talking about creatine. So that's why I was asking you actually. I have an interesting question, interesting to me, because I don't pay attention on the timing of the supplements myself, because I take quite a bit. So I don't like separate them. Obviously, the night times and the morning times are separated. But besides that, I kind of just like swallow whatever many I need to take in the morning. And it's not written anything on them. The only thing it says like take with meal. Does it matter? Because I think you think it does matter. Certain things should not be mixed to each other.
It's a great question, and when I worked clinically as a chief clinical dietitian, we had these guides that would show drug nutrient interactions and nutrient interactions. And there are a number of drugs that deplete certain nutrients. There are other nutrients that interact with each other. There's herbs that can create deficiencies. It gets complicated, and it's called polypharmacy when you have many things that you're taking, many drugs, many nutrients, many supplements. We don't know. Like, honestly, I mean, because there's so many formulas, and what I could be taking day to day in my stack versus what you're taking versus what another person's taking, then factor in our bio individuality and the way the cytochrome P450 pathway works with our liver and how we metabolize these things, and our gut microbiome. It gets very complicated. We have no idea, honestly. That's why the scientific method is important, where you're trying to minimize the number of confounding variables. So this would be trying to take one thing at a time, or if you have your stack that you've been taking for years, that is your baseline. So add one thing at a time. Try and figure out what that one thing is doing. You pointed out the creatine, like I'm assuming that you were just taking that and testing that in and of itself, and that's where you could delineate that you were seeing these benefits from it. I mean, that's important to do, like where you're testing these in a more scientific fashion versus what's called the kitchen sink, where you're throwing everything in all at once and you have no idea what's doing what. And if you get sick, if you have side effects, or you have incredible benefits, you have no idea what to attribute it to. And not only that, sometimes the form of that ingredient is wrong. Sometimes the dose is wrong. And to your point, sometimes the timing is wrong. Sometimes the food you may have had it with is wrong, or the food may have had a certain acid with it that activated that nutrient in a certain way. It's very complicated, and this is where working with a nutritionist, working with a naturopath, or someone who has expertise in supplements, in nutrition, and medications can be helpful.
I have a baseline supplement stack that was prescribed by my dear friend, mentor, and she's a board certified functional medicine doctor. So it was based on the Metagenics blood work that I had a couple of years ago. Then on top, of course, me being so excited, oh, there's this new and there's that new, and let me add this. That's the part that I'm like self-experimenting, such as really wonderful benefits and effects of the urolithin A. That's one of the supplements that I was able to see. It's been now maybe 8 to 10 months that I'm taking it. And I started suggesting to my sister and stuff, like I saw a steady size on my muscles, steady energy all day long. So I saw that. And a man, take it or leave it, I just don't feel it. I just, all these trips for a month, I stopped taking them. I didn't feel any different. Now I started taking the last couple of days. Since I'm back, still no difference. So I know you have your own thought for NMN, NR, all these. How do you feel about them?
Again, it's complicated. It depends what your mitochondrial state is. Maybe you have great mitochondrial function and health. It's like the ketogenic diet. You may not see as much benefit because you're naturally lean, you're highly energetic, you're insulin sensitive. But if someone was insulin insensitive, was borderline diabetic, had immune function issues, was immunologically compromised, they may see tremendous benefit from the ketogenic diet, or from things that boost NAD levels. People that are chronically underslept, people that are alcoholic, people that are under heavy stress. These are things that deplete NAD levels as we age. So it's hard to say, like, you may be in a good situation with your diet, with your exercise, lifestyle habits, that you have good mitochondrial function, you have good NAD levels. Maybe these things aren't making that big of a difference. But for some people, they can. So I do think NMN is superior to NR. There's a new form, NMNH, that I'm looking at evaluating right now that's interesting. But these do boost NAD levels. But actually, I believe niacin in its full flesh form is actually the best thing. Now, you have to deal with the paresthesis, the flushing, which can be intense, especially at a dose that I take like 500 milligrams twice a day. That is a lot of, like, literally you can see your face turn red. You feel that flushing and tingling and almost burning. Feels like a sunburn. So it's something that you have to deal with. But just niacin alone, which is very cheap, raised NAD levels about 8x in a study.
I have a very funny story, actually. A couple of years ago, I don't even know why I took niacin. and I probably it was a high dose. I got so red. I thought that I was having some allergic reaction to something, and I was going to an ER until I called my doctor. I said, like, this is what's happening. I'm all red. I'm itchy. I'm like, it's my face is burning. And she goes like, what did you take? Oh yeah, that's niacin. It takes a minute like that. It's not like in 30 seconds goes away. It stays there like at least an hour.
Yeah, it does. It can last a little while. On top of that, these polyphenols that I was talking about before that are great for neuroplasticity, also another reason that they may contribute to anti-aging is they inhibit CD38, or it's also known as NADAs, the enzyme that breaks down NAD. So when you co-administer these ingredients with NAD boosters, you may see additional benefits. So those are things like, again, EGCG, pterostilbene, resveratrol, or maybe on the most bioavailable end are things like FISSN or apigenin.
So you believe in FISSN?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I just was listening to a rather famous doctor in this field of longevity, and she said that, she stopped using it and giving to her patients because there's not enough evidence supporting it.
I know that study that's being mentioned in terms of being a senolytic, but at the same time, when it comes to NADAs and inhibiting this enzyme, that's very well demonstrated. Another thing we're not really sure about when it comes to things like senolytics for that purpose, what may be more effective instead of chronically dosing these things is taking supraphysiologic doses, maybe like 3 days a month. That's something that actually Qualia has stepped forward with as a brand. I like that approach. It does seem like right now that the science is supporting that, taking very large doses of these senolytics in a small window. It's kind of like fasting. It's like you wouldn't want to fast all day, every day, but it may have benefit to do maybe once a month to do an extended fast.
I think you have this approach for some of these molecules anyway. So tell me a little bit about how you manage these stacks.
How I manage the stacks?
Yeah. So you're not like taking them every day. It's not like you take the NMN every day, or what do you do?
I do feel like this is just like the idea of testosterone replacement, where your body senses that you have exogenous or outside the body testosterone and it stops making it itself. I am mindful of these things where I want to cycle through my supplements. I don't want to stay on them indefinitely, continuously, where that becomes a baseline. I think it's more powerful that I use them, I cycle through them. I mean, this is the same thing that you do with workouts, right? You work out a certain body part, but you cycle through body parts. And then you change that specific exercise that you're doing for that body part maybe every 6 weeks so that you can challenge the muscle in a new way. And I look at doing supplements in a similar way. I rotate through them. Like, for example, I like the adaptogens for resilience, but I may take ashwagandha 1 month, I may take rhodiola the next month, I may take maca the next month, and lion's mane the next month. So I try a variety of things. I also listen to my body. I have intuition and think about what are my needs? Where's my energy at right now? Like, what am I feeling right now that I'm kind of low in? And where do I feel good right now? And that's how I dose these things. So it's science as well as intuition.
Yeah, that's great. Unfortunately, when I start taking something, I'm like, more is better type of approach, but actually it's a very wrong approach. So I'm trying to restrain myself, and especially now I'm traveling a lot. Besides the basic things that I really need to take, I just don't take with me the rest, so that my body would have a couple of days off them, so that, like you said, I can see the difference. Actually, how I started the creatine while I was not taking the other things, I was able to probably see it better, the difference. Yeah. What's the future for the supplements? Because that's also one of my questions, but also my concern. So often nowadays that there is a new thing coming out, and I'm not talking about the same molecule out by multiple different brands. Urolithin A, Akkermansia, NMN, and then suddenly there's one more thing and one more thing. It's really sometimes concerning to say how many more we're going to take, what's going to work for me. Is this going to be always like this? We're going to keep adding, and finally we're going to have like 500 supplements that we're going to take.
It can feel like that. And again, that's where I kind of rotate through things. I use different things. I think that's really the best approach. And you don't eat the same thing at every meal every day. I think it's the same thing. You want a variety of food. So I go through supplements like that. I think I look at the science, I see whether they have value. I add them into my stack, and then, I rotate through them, and I may come back to it, I may not. I mean, one, I may look at, did I feel a difference? But then two, is the science there to support it? And so I'm just going to rotate through them. Like I said, I'm going to use intuition, I'm going to use the science, but I'm in a position where I can try almost all these things. I know most people aren't. I have a handful of ingredients that I feel like are the must-haves. Things like you mentioned, like creatine, I think is a must-take. I think taking a multivitamin that has the methylated B vitamins and has these organic minerals or amino acid chelate minerals. I think taking a dihydroberberine is very powerful. It's not only an AMPK activator, which is a very potent anti-aging pathway, similar to berberine and metformin, but it also is a GLP-1 agonist, similar to these other GLP-1 compounds that are out on the market, the semaglutides and Ozempics. And so we're seeing powerful anti-aging effects with dihydroberberine and these other compounds. We know that 87% of Americans are metabolically dysfunctional. A large number, maybe 40%, are diabetic or pre-diabetic. And so this is one of the most powerful things that we can do for anti-aging. And it's going to have the greatest benefit if you are metabolically dysfunctional, if you are obese, if you are pre-diabetic or diabetic. But it's going to be still powerful for anti-aging. We've seen in studies benefits suppressing hemoglobin A1C, suppressing inflammation, even below what's considered normal limits, is associated with longevity. So, even lean people that are aging well are going to benefit from taking a compound like dihydroberberine. So those are really important ones to me. And then, as I mentioned, I do feel like the 7,8 dihydroxyflavone, the 4-DMA dihydroxyflavone can be very powerful. A metabolite of curcumin that I came out with, tetrahydrocurcumin, can be powerful for managing inflammation, which I think is very important in the aging process, in the disease process. We really want to look at things like glycation, inflammation, and oxidation. And that's where things like tetrahydrocurcumin and dihydroberberine are very powerful. Maybe lastly, there's a nutrient that is potentially going to be a new vitamin that I helped bring to the market called ergothioneine. And ergothioneine occurs naturally in certain organ meats, beans, and mushrooms. And it is a mitochondrial antioxidant, not just a cellular antioxidant. And there's a unique transporter system in your body for it. There's a unique storage system for it in your body. And this tells you how important this nutrient is if you have a transporter just for this thing. We have demonstrated that there is a deficiency when you don't get enough of it. There's a cognitive decline. But we think it's actually critical for aging well and protecting the mitochondria and keeping energy stores up with ATP that is produced from the mitochondria. And so the research around ergothioneine is quite compelling. It's about 30 times more potent than glutathione as an antioxidant. It's more potent than vitamin C and CoQ10. Dr. Bruce Ames, the famed longevity researcher, calls it the longevity vitamin. So that is one that I think all people should be on because I think it's very hard to find in the diet.
So you don't need to take the other things that you mentioned, such as glutathione or vitamin C, if you take ergothioneine?
Glutathione, no. I think you can produce that well on your own if you have the proper nutrients from that well formulated multivitamin. As I mentioned, vitamin C absolutely should be present in that multivitamin. I definitely think you should be taking that. I do take a liposomal vitamin C, and I'm a big form of taking higher dose vitamin C at times. So yeah, I think those are excellent. I think actually N-acetylcysteine is probably more effective to me than taking oral glutathione.
How long it takes to take the hemoglobin A1C to take it down? How long you should use dihydroberberine?
With hemoglobin A1C, it's a longer term indicator of blood glucose, which is a very transient lab. It goes up and down quite a bit. So I would, use dihydroberberine or whatever intervention you're looking at, ketogenic diet or, some medication or whatever it is, and then retest in 90 days.
Okay, because I started taking since March dihydroberberine after I listened to your podcast with Natalie. And I said, okay, interesting, because we have diabetes too in my family. And I'm not pre-diabetic, but I'm pretty sure I'm pre-diabetic. Not that because of how I eat, but I can see that it's like my fasting glucose level is like 90, 93. I'm mostly eating protein oriented or ketogenic. But so I started taking, my doctor said that, metformin would not be appropriate, not necessary at this stage.
Yeah, I agree. The dihydroberberine would. And on top of that, one of the most powerful things that you can do is after you eat, do the postprandial stroll. So that means literally when you're done eating, taking a walk for 10 to 15 minutes. We don't have to do extreme exercise. Just even taking a walk for 10 to 15 minutes has been shown to have a profound effect on lowering blood sugar. It will upregulate these GLUT4 receptors on the cell and translocate glucose into the cell. So even if you're inefficient at insulin sensitivity, at taking that glucose up into the cell, just that movement after you eat is going to help dramatically at lowering blood sugar and keeping it down.
My last question, let me ask, what are the exciting things waiting for you? Innovations, companies, partnerships?
Right now, the paraxanthine is getting put in basically every pre-workout energy drinks. It's replacing caffeine across the board. People are experiencing it so well and loving it. Dileucine is a new ingredient that I worked on. That's a dipeptide of leucine. Leucine drives muscle protein synthesis. As we know, muscle is again the most critical factor for how well we age. It protects not only the muscle mass, but also your strength, your power, your bone mineral density, because the bone is definitely determined by how much muscle you have and how you use it, the nervous system and how to activate that muscle and recruit those muscle fibers. Getting dileucine is about 60% better gram for gram at increasing muscle protein synthesis than standard leucine. And so that's a huge breakthrough. Basically, it doesn't matter how much leucine you take, there's a refractory effect, like where you're not going to get additional benefit, but you are getting additional benefit because dileucine is using a special transporter that's actually faster than free-form leucine, even though that seems counterintuitive. But that's because this special transporter, the peptide transporter, prefers to take up di and tripeptides because they're now what we know as bioregulatory signaling peptides. These short amino acid peptides, di and tripeptides, are signaling the body to do certain things. So that's something that I kind of manipulated to do this 2-leucine molecule, and we see it's 189% faster. We see there's 80% more leucine in the muscle. We see 60% better muscle protein synthesis. So every workout, you're going to get more benefit. You're going to have more muscle mass. You're going to protect more muscle mass. So that's really exciting right now.
Is it out?
It is. It just came out. It's with Muscle Tech is the first company to launch it with a product called Peptide 185. But there's more products coming.
So are you going to make a branched chain amino acid with it, or it's going to be by itself?
Actually, they are releasing a product that has essential amino acids and dileucine together. And there's another company that's releasing a product that's going to have HMB plus the dileucine plus D3. HMB is one of the most powerful anti-catabolics at inhibiting muscle protein breakdown. So when you put these two together, if you're inhibiting muscle protein breakdown and you're accentuating muscle protein synthesis, that's really going to accelerate muscle gain and protecting muscle.
Wow, it's so exciting, Shawn. I feel so privileged that I met you, and thank you so much that you joined the podcast. I'm looking forward for the days that we will also do work together. We're going to plan
I'm
on
looking
that.
forward to that too. That'll be wonderful. So yes,
And
keep me posted.
and I'll see you Monday night probably in Helsinki.
That sounds wonderful. I'll see you there.
Thank you so much.